Some pretty big news this week, Richie, with Michael Alford publicly calling out the ACC. I spoke with him about a week and a half ago. We had him on. You had a little happenstance, little come up. You weren't able to be there when we spoke with him. But I know you watched back. I know you listened to it. He alluded to some of this stuff. He talked about some of the revenue disparities. He hinted at some of it. I was a little bit surprised he said on the podcast, just because I didn't know what would be public, what wouldn't be public coming out of those ACC meetings. But yeah, the podcast made it look like child's play. Like he came out here and absolutely crushed the ACC with what he was saying the other day. We want to talk about it. We want to break it all down. But thoughts on Michael Alford going after the ACC like he did?
Yeah, I think, you look around the landscape of college football right now, and it's clearly not sustainable with what we're being paid in the ACC. I think, Alford and his predecessor have done a pretty good job doing more with less in terms of funds. But again, why does a school like Wake Forest or Boston College get as much money as Florida State? It makes no sense whatsoever. You look and see what the Big Ten and SEC are making. Alford, basically said, listen, we can't run at a $30 million deficit compared to these other conferences every year, because in 3 years, that's almost $100 million that schools like Florida and Alabama and Texas A&M and Michigan, Ohio State, etc., have that big of a head start on you, and it's compounded, like you said, right? It's just going to get worse and worse. So Florida State, it's interesting because what do we do? It's good to see Alford go public, right? It'd be great to see Clemson's AD go public or North Carolina's AD go public. There's not a whole lot of brands. Miami, say what you want, small school, no attendance. They're at least a big enough brand. Well, their AD go public, who was formerly at Clemson, right? That he knows the issue that this conference is facing right now, and it's a major one because right now, Florida State struggled to get this new football-only facility built. Hopefully by the end of next year it'll be built, but it should have been built already, right? You're competing with all these schools that you go up against in recruiting year in and year out, and Alford's looking around saying, guys, this is not sustainable. What are we doing? So I think bringing, public eyes to it made national headlines. I even got a notification on my ESPN app that Michael Alford called out the ACC, and it's something that it's probably an uncomfortable position to be in, but it's something that had to be done, in my opinion.
Michael Alford said something has to change because we cannot compete nationally being $30 million behind every year. It's not 1 year. We're talking about $30 million compounded every year. Richie, you talk about brands like Georgia and Georgia and Florida and Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan. Here's what the problem is. It's not just those brands. Vanderbilt makes a lot more money from their revenue share than we do. Rutgers makes a lot more. Northwestern, Mississippi State, South Carolina, brands that we know, okay, Alabama makes more than you. I mean, obviously, you certainly don't want that. But you get it, right? Georgia, who's won 1 billion games in a row and 2 national championships, you get it. Why? Vandy, Northwestern,
yeah.
Minnesota, Purdue, these schools should not be making more than Florida State. And we're not talking about like $2 million more. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars, and it's going to get worse. It's going to be more and more and more. And so, again, we love Michael Alford. He's been on our show several times. We've chatted with him several times. Again, he gave us a little appetizer of what was coming a week and a half ago. But it's not just those big schools. It's the brands that are less than us. Alford said, because we are a brand and we're a very important brand, we drive the media value in this conference. Based on market valuation that Alford has commissioned, he said that FSU contributes roughly 15% of the value in the ACC's media rights deal. However, they only get about 7% of the distributions as one of the 14 full members of the conference. So again, in maybe a little more layman's terms, Florida State contributes more than anybody else with the size of their brand, the television audience that they bring in, and they get back 7% because it's an equal revenue sharing. And Alford has been very, very to the point on this, and very, this is how we're going to change things, and we need to do it by unequal revenue sharing. And so that will be interesting. Richie, do you think the ACC budges? I thought Bud Elliott had a good point that we'll talk about here in just a minute. But before we get to that, what are your thoughts on just the ACC and this may be happening, not happening, unequal revenue sharing?
I don't see it happening because why would Wake Forest and Boston College and Syracuse willingly give up money to keep Florida State happy? When, again, we're kind of stuck here for probably the next 13 years. It's one of the most one-sided TV deals I've ever seen. At the time, we criticized John Swofford for it as a fan base, saying, why would you lock us up for this long? And, it's now, the reality is that everything that, all the concerns that we all had are coming to the surface, and it's a major issue. Swofford, one of the worst commissioners in college sports, and I'm not letting Jim Phillips off the hook either. He came in talking a big game and hasn't done squat, and he sounds, when you listen to him now, going back to the ACC Media Days this year, he didn't have an answer. He didn't even want to answer that question. And it's a major issue because, like you said, schools like Vanderbilt, Mizzou, et cetera, are getting much more money than Florida State. And on the football front, I think we're going to be okay one way or the other. You'd like to get that more money. But, we're going to need to hire a new head basketball coach in the next, 1 to 3, 4 years or so. And, we go to Mizzou and say, hey, he's making $2.5 million. Oh, we'll just bump him up to $5 million because Florida State can't pay that. So it hurts all of the other sports. It hurts football, but more than anything, it hurts all of these other sports. We almost lost Lonnie to Texas A&M. But kudos to Michael Alford for getting her deal done and keeping her here. But yeah, it's just the entire athletic department is going to suffer unless something changes. But to your question, TJ, no, I don't see these other schools that don't contribute anything, literally maybe 1% of the value of the conference, why would they give up money voluntarily just to keep Florida State happy? I just don't see that happening, but I think it's something that should happen.
So Alford also said that FSU and Clemson combined on around 24%, so let's round up and call that 1/4 of the value in the conference. You've got two teams carrying about 1/4 of the value. And I think if you added Miami in there, you'd probably be looking at very close to 1/3 with all three of the teams. As much as we like to clown them, they are a brand that people like to tune in and watch. And they collect a combined 14%, right? 7% each. Here's what Bud Elliott said of 247 and also the Nolecast. Shout out the OG podcast in FSU land. But Bud said this: if you're one of those teams, the Syracuses, the Boston Colleges, the Wake Forests, really most of the teams in this conference that aren't Florida State, Clemson, and Miami, do you want to take a little bit of a pay cut now, or in 3 or 4 or 5 years when Florida State and Clemson and Miami all join together and they're able to leave the conference, pay the buyouts, get out of the grant of rights, renegotiate, whatever is able to end up happening, you then lose like 80 to 90% of your revenue because no TV company out there is going to sign the remaining members of the ACC to any kind of a deal. And so I thought that was a good take. Now, does that come to fruition? Does that happen? Does Syracuse see it that way? Most people do not believe in delayed gratification, right? Like, most people do not say like, oh yeah, let me cut by a little bit now to make Clemson and Florida State happy so that I don't get it all taken from me later on and lose 90 or 80% of my revenue. So I thought that was a good point. And Bud's right. If Florida State and Clemson and Miami, as much as we like to give them a hard time, were able to get out of this conference quickly, and quickly could mean 5 years if this deal's through 2036. If they were able to get out of it, everybody else is, up a creek without a paddle, as they say. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting point. I don't necessarily know that it plays out like that, but I do think the conference would be smart to try to appease Florida State and Clemson, because if they don't, maybe this is a good transition to getting out of the grant of rights, leaving the ACC. If they don't, if Florida State has to sit there with the 7% return that they're getting right now, I think that Florida State is going to be more aggressive to get out of the conference. And will they be able to? I don't know. I know that they've got their attorneys working on that like crazy. I know that they are actively doing their very best to get out of the conference based on the people that I've talked with. It just becomes a numbers game of what makes sense and when you're able to do it. But I think the ACC and its smaller members would be smart to try to appease Florida State and Clemson, or else I think they're going pretty balls to the wall to get out of here.
Well, I think that's what makes this such a smart move by Alford. Like I said, it makes things uncomfortable a bit, right? But it is sending a message because the other schools are listening, and who else is listening? I just said ESPN sent the notification on their app. Well, they own the rights to the ACC right now. So it's a big deal for Florida State to put that message out there, to your point, TJ, because these other TV contractor providers, whether it's Amazon, Apple, if we're believe we're going to the streaming area here shortly for college sports, they're paying attention as well. And no one's going to sign a deal with the ACC knowing that Florida State's unhappy right now, right? Because that's the reason you want the ACC is because of Florida State. Like you said, Clemson, Miami as well, but Florida State has been the biggest brand in this conference since they joined back in the early 90s. So you're sending a message to these other schools that say, hey, you know what? We're going to leave at some point unless you guys do something to entice us to stay, because there's no incentive for Florida State to stay in the ACC long term. And these other schools have to make a decision. Do they say, hey, do we risk losing Florida State? Or to your point and Bud's point, maybe it is better to peel back a little bit of what we're getting now just to keep the ACC a viable option. Because if Florida State, Clemson, and Miami leaves, the ACC is no longer a viable option. It's the Big East at that point.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I skipped out on ACC Media Days last year. I went in 2021. I didn't go in I'm going this year. I think that this is the year. Like last year was a little bit uncomfortable. This year, though, they're gonna be sweating up there, and not because I think that's gonna be the year to go to. Really, like as a fan, to just sit back and watch it. I think it's gonna be pretty nuts. And like I said, I think that in Florida State's best case scenario, they're able to get some unequal revenue sharing here in the next couple of months, years, try and renegotiate this thing a little bit, and then still leave in a couple of years. I mean, that's kind of like a little appetizer for what they really want, and how aggressive they'll be with leaving, I think, is pretty deterrent on what happens with this. So we'll see. I do love this, though. I love that Michael Alford absolutely goes to bat for us, goes to bat for this university, goes to bat for this athletic program, goes to bat for his coaches, his athletes, the Florida State fans, boosters, members. If you haven't signed up to be a booster, you've got a guy in charge that's absolutely fighting his tail off for you right now. You should probably go sign up to be a booster. If you have questions on that, you can comment below and we'll try and answer or direct you in the right direction. But I will say, I love, like you said, we had some leadership here that maybe in the past we didn't find to be the very best. I do think that Alford absolutely kicks butt in this role and does the uncomfortable things to do what's best for Florida State.
Yeah, and he has to. And it reminds this is really, I put a tweet out there and I truly believe this. This is the first time we have a real AD who's not kind of just a placeholder or a joke since Dave Hart, probably, when he was pushed out by TK Weatherall back when I was in school. Michael Alford means business. He's been around the block. He knows what's going on. He's been at Alabama, been at Oklahoma State, been with the Dallas Cowboys. He knows he's a business-minded individual, and he said that from the start. Money is what's going to keep this program afloat. He said from day one when we had him on here, when he took over his new role, his goal is to be a fundraising athletic director. He understands the importance of having money for this for the school, and for him to go out publicly like that, I can't recall. And granted, I don't follow athletic directors of other conferences as closely, but an athletic director going out publicly, basically saying, "Hey, this is it." And from the sounds of it, at the Board of Trustees meeting, he basically said, I want out. It may be beyond repair at this point. It's just finding the path out at this point.
Yeah. The question was asked, how much would it take to get out? And a number was thrown out. So they're asking. They're talking about it. And I'll tell you guys, we're close to that. Alfred didn't tell me this. I've talked with other people inside of that building in the administration who have, since last summer, when I was told this, have been actively working to get Florida State out of this conference. Is that feasible right now? Is that possible right now? I don't think so, because they would be out, right? You would already have gotten a notification on your apps. But I do know that they're working on it behind the scenes, and it is a major focus. Do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed if you're watching this. We are pretty plugged into this. I don't want to say that we have the best info on it, but we do like to chat with Michael Alford quite a bit. We like to be pretty plugged in on this, and we will keep you updated on this subject as more comes out and as you learn more. We also provide a great deal of exclusive info to our members, so if you would consider joining and being a member today, we would appreciate that. Also, make sure that you're shopping at Garnet and Gold. Baseball, softball team had a great weekend. You can go get NIL merchandise over there right now. Softball went 6-0. Baseball went 3-1 on a 4-game road trip. They were really, really good. Beat top 10 TCU team this week in the series. You can go to garnetandgold.com if you're not shopping locally there in Tallahassee. You can use code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, to get 15% off of your order at garnetandgold.com. If you are local in Tallahassee, you can do in-store pickup, save on the shipping, and still save 15%. It doesn't work at the counter. You got to order online, but it's NOSLAW, NOSLAW. Appreciate those good folks over at Garnet and Gold. I'll go by and I'll make sure that I see them when I'm up in town this week. Shout out Garnet and Gold. Again, you guys are FSU fans. If you're watching this video, NOSLAW, NOSLAW, to save 15% at checkout.